deadlifts. What muscles are we working when we're doing our straight leg deadlift? So our hamstrings. Hamstrings are in the backs of our legs. You actually have 3 hamstring muscles, if you guys didn't know that. And so when you're doing your straight leg deadlift, you should predominantly be feeling this in the backs of your legs. So basically from your knee up to the base of your glutes. Again, straight leg deadlifts, you can feel them definitely in your glutes. Some people, you have super tight calves. You will feel them in your calves, and like that's not wrong. It's not wrong to feel it in your glutes, but it should definitely predominantly be felt in your hamstrings. You really want to think about your hamstrings, and like any exercise, you kind of want to try to initiate the movement with the target muscle. So you want to think about your hamstrings right off the bat. Again, with any exercise, no matter what you are, there's kind of like that sequence you want to be thinking about. So you want to set yourself up. You want to initiate the exercise, you want to control the exercise, you want to contract the proper muscles. So again, setting up our deadlift, there's a few variations in terms of your stance, and you can play with your stance. In some programs, you guys might have a little bit wider stance description in your video. Some might be a little closer, some might be holding different types of weights, but for the most part, you want to be about a shoulder width stance for your deadlift. Again, you can take it a little wider, you can have your toes out a little bit. The biggest thing if you're turning your toes any which way is your knees should be always traveling in line with your toes. The way that most people feel deadlifts the best is about a shoulder width stance with toes facing forward, okay? So now that we got our stance, we gotta make sure that our feet are even. You'd be shocked, I'm pretty sure most of you guys are good, but I see it at the gym all the time. People just like jump up, their feet aren't even, they just grab their weights and they start deadlifting, and like their feet aren't even. So make sure you check it out. You want to have like an imaginary line or a real line if you can help it. Line your toes up, point your feet, and already start to torque your feet down into the ground. You want that tension right away. You don't want to be standing lazy, no tension. You want to work as much as possible, okay? So plant your feet down. Next thing, like any exercise, you want to engage your core. You want to keep your back engaged. Now, the main movement of the deadlift is your hip hinge. So the biggest thing you want to be focusing on, I'm going to go from the side, you can see me good here. If you guys have questions throughout this, just drop them in the comments. You want to be able to get that hinge in your hips, and that is not a super simple movement for a lot of people. Some people can just pick it up immediately and have no problem. Some people struggle with it a little bit more. So I have a couple cues and a couple tips that can help you with it. But essentially what you want to do is get that hinge into your hip joints. So you're not hunching over, you're literally cracking at your hips, sending your glutes to the back wall, and essentially like folding your body in half. This is what we want to focus on to start, is that hip hinging movement. If you do go to the gym, and if this is something you struggle with a lot, sometimes using a cable on a rope on a cable, to practice that hip hinge. So one of my clients, Bryn, she's probably watching this, she was someone who struggled a lot with a hip hinge movement, and we had to do quite a few cable style deadlifts with a rope till she got it, but when she got it, she like nails it. So the hip hinge is super critical to make sure that you are doing properly. So again, set up your movement, feet planted down. So next thing you want to do is start sending your glutes to the back wall. So again, we want to get that stretch through our hamstrings, because all working out is lengthening and shortening your muscles. So right now my hamstrings are going to be in that lengthened position. So from there, we initiate it with our hips. Now we're going to bring ourselves back up with our hips. We're not just going to stand up like this. Again, this hinge here is going to come forward. We're going to drive our butt forward, stand up at the top. Okay? Core tight, shoulders down, away from my ears, head in line with my spine. That's the biggest mistake I see when people send me a video. They're doing everything properly, but they're looking up or they're looking down. Head in line with your spine, crack at the hips, send your butt to the back wall. Head in line with my spine, keep sending it. You want to get as big of an angle as possible because you want to maximize the stretch in your hips. But you also don't want to let your pelvis fall here. You want to keep your abs engaged. So again, we want that pelvis positioned properly. Send your glutes back, head in line with your spine, keep pushing. Now here, you can actually almost act like you're pushing your feet in front of you, into the ground and in front of you to get that bigger angle. So feet going down, now push your feet down, send your glutes back, and act like you're literally folding your body in half. Like if you want to practice this movement, you can literally just like reach your arms out and see like how much of a hinge you can get in your hips, okay? So that's kind of like the premise of the exercise. Now I'm gonna go through a few little tips and tricks that you guys can implement to make it better. Planting your feet. Now you wanna keep your back engaged, especially when you're holding your weights, because something that happens all the time is people start to round forward. So when you have your weights, I'm gonna grab my dumbbells here, you want to keep them close to your thighs, basically right up against them. Pelvis tilted properly, core engaged, back engaged, not hunched forward, back engaged. So slight tension between your shoulder blades, chest nice and proud, head in line with your spine, crack of the hips, send your glutes back. You should start to feel the stretch on the back of your legs, in your hamstrings, pushing your feet down and almost in front of you, keeping your core engaged. Don't let it go, keep it there. Back flat, dumbbells close to your legs. You don't want them out here because that's going to start to put that weight onto your lower back. This is not a lower back exercise. You might feel it there because you're using some stabilizing muscles in your lower back, but your lower back should not be hurting. So dumbbells nice and close to your thighs, shoulders down with your ears. We don't want to have it up here. We don't want any weight in our arms really. Our legs are doing the work. Crack forward, here we go. Now another mistake that I see is people going way down here. So again, that's not maximizing our hamstrings. So you'll be able to find where your end range of motion is if you even film yourself and just practice and see at what point does your body start to go down without your hips going back. So for me, it's about here. So I should have a pretty good range of motion in my hips. If you find that you have like a crazy good range of motion, another tip you can do, some of you guys have this in your plan, is you can actually elevate your toes a little bit. Again, this is like an advanced version if you're like mastered this exercise, and then you'll be able to get more of a stretch into, like for me, like I feel this a lot already. But again, that's like something that if you can literally like drop to the floor and keep all of everything engaged. So for the general movement, back engaged, we want to stretch our hamstrings, send our glutes back, core engaged. We don't want to drop our body. Even in a normal exercise, this coming down movement should take you about 3 seconds at least. When you're at your end point, you're going to initiate with your hips to come back up, so drive your butt forward, stand up straight at the top, drag your feet in. You don't need to do this. That's another thing I see. People come out and they think they need to like overextend at the top for some reason. You just want to stack your spine. Again, this doesn't do anything for our hamstrings. That's all in our back. If you're the person that does, which I don't think any of you guys are, but I see this all the time, people, their hips don't move, so literally my hamstrings are doing no work. They're just staying stagnant. Hunch here, drop my shoulders, round and forward, come back up and do this. Literally see this all the time at the gym. I don't know what it is about. I hope that someone watches this video and can correct themselves if that's them. So, plant your feet, hinge, keep the dumbbells close, shoulders down with your ears, a little bit of tightness on your arms, but you shouldn't be like holding the weights way out here. Hinge it forward, drive your feet down, get that good stretch through the back of your legs, shoulders down with your ears, head in line with your spine. Go to the point where your body is about parallel to the floor. Some people, their end range of motion is going to be here, and that is completely fine. If this is your deadlift, that's totally fine. You just want to work on improving your range of motion. If you even just can get your hips back to here, if you've never ever done that before, you will feel it in your hamstrings. Come back up at the top. And when you come up at the top, again, stacking your spine. We don't need to arch or anything, keeping your core engaged, keeping your head straight. Does anyone have any questions about that so far? Who do I got here? I think Tracy's here, Kelsey, Paulette. Is that everybody? How are you guys doing? So again, something else since Kelsey's here. Kelsey used to do this as well. When you are doing your deadlift motion, you want to make sure that you are also lengthening your spine. So some people, especially when you're starting to go a little heavier in your deadlifts, they kind of get like caught up in their spine a little bit. So especially, not necessarily if you're taller, but I find it's more common in taller clients. You want to be like stretching your spine. So from your tailbone, basically to the tip of your head, you want to kind of be lengthening that. So as well as pushing your butt back, you want to be stretching your spine the opposite direction, because we can also get kind of caught up in ourselves, and that's also going to limit our range of motion. That's something that Kelsey fixed quite a while ago, and like she kills it now in her deadlifts, and she's really strong in them. So I'll do a couple with proper form for you guys, but first I'm going to show you one more thing. Another thing you want to be mindful of from the front is not letting your hips cave in. So keep your hips relatively open. Like this would be an open hip. This would be kind of like a closed hip, even if my knees are out, closing off your hips. So sometimes people can almost cave in, and it would look like this, even from the side. If you're starting to go down, cave, that was a bad cave, that was more of a back cave. It's hard to do it wrong when you're used to doing it right. Here, and then start to cave. I don't know if you can tell from the side, when your pelvis and your hips kind of like close off. So again, you want to make sure when you plant your feet that all of your leg and hip and knee and thigh and everything is staying in alignment. So you don't want to let your knees collapse, you don't want to let your hips collapse as you go into that movement. You want to be lengthening and opening up, pushing your feet down and forward. Okay, and then the other tip that I was going to say, what was the other tip? I was just thinking of it. Hi, Bryn. I was just talking about you. We're talking about the hip hinge. Shoot, what was the other tip? Let me think for a second. I'm going to have a drink of water, and I'm going to think. Oh, okay, the other tip. This is a big one. So there is a type of deadlift where you bend your knees. That's not the type of deadlift that we're talking about here. We'll maybe do that one another time. I generally don't put that one too much in home workouts, just because it's kind of easier and better to do it with like a barbell, because you can load it a little more ideally, but you can totally do the other type of deadlift with dumbbells as well. But from the side view, something I see a lot, especially people with weak hamstrings, is you start to bend your knees too much. So if you're doing your stiff leg deadlift, which is the Romanian deadlift, which is what we're talking about, you can have a little bend in your knees, especially if you have knees that hyperextend. So my knees hyperextend, so they will go backwards. So if that's you, you want to keep a little bend in your knees. You can straighten your legs, and that's totally fine. But if you're straightening them, or if you're keeping a little bend in them, you don't want to change the angle in your knees. So here, if I'm keeping this little bend in my knees, I'm sending my hips back, that is the same bend in my knees throughout the whole movement, okay? So what happens, especially when we start to get tired and we don't realize it, is we start to bend our knees, because that's taking away the stretch from our hamstrings. So if you look at the distance from my hip to my hamstrings in this position, so you can see from here to here, it's quite stretched out. But if I bend it, that changes the angle, and it takes the work away from my hamstrings, actually gives it more to my quads. So even though you might not feel it a lot in your quads, it's going to take away from the work in your hamstrings. And hamstrings, a lot of people kind of overlook this one, but hamstrings are super, super important for lifting your glutes and making your glutes look amazing and round. Because if you don't have a good glute ham tie at the top, your butt is going to look flat. And if you guys want to see a really good example of that, my transformation picture that's in my it's on the Cut and Conquer Instagram page of me in like a bikini that's like blue on the top, black on the bottom. And you can see that my glutes look way better in the after photo. And I didn't really build my glutes much, and I didn't really train my glutes much during that program. I literally just focused on my hamstrings, and up until I started that program, I had an injury in my hamstrings from like 2017, and like that was the year that I really started working on my hamstrings again, and my glutes looked way better. My hamstrings looked a little bit better, and it made a huge difference. So if you are one of the people in the program who like really want to build up your glutes, you also are really going to want to focus on your hamstrings, because it really ties everything together. Bryn says, LOL, I definitely curved my back before. Bryn's got a good hip hinge now. Sarah says, hey, missed the beginning since I'm at work, so we'll watch the replay and as much as I can now before I have to go to the field. Cool. Sarah, you got a pretty good deadlift too. You nail those. Okay, so another thing, just because I know there's a few variations of these in your guys' plan, so you can also do the single dumbbell deadlift. A few of you guys have that. You'll probably want to go a little heavier on this one because you're only loading it with one dumbbell. I usually will put this one in your program and then superset it with a squat. So, or I think I usually put the squat first. I can't recall. So same thing, when you are only holding one dumbbell, you especially want to make sure that you don't cave in because you're only holding one thing. So here you go, as I'm doing this, I'm actually kind of almost opening my hips so they don't cave in, and I'm pushing my feet down, shoulders down away from my ears, back is engaged, driving my feet down, and come up. So you don't want all of the weight in your heels, but you definitely don't want all of the weight in your toes. Does that make sense? That's pretty much everything. Does anyone have any questions? So as long as you're keeping your back flat, as long as you're keeping your back slightly engaged, you don't want to have it rounded, back flat, pelvis tucked. There's a lot going on in a deadlift. Feet planted, don't move them around. Dumbbells close to your legs, shoulders down away from your ears, head in line with your spine. Don't forget to breathe in, and then breathe out as you come up. Initiate with your hips, drive it forward, straight up to the top. Sarah says, thanks, I used to hate deadlifts, but you helped me hugely with them, and with my confidence in them, now I love them. Grow the booty, yes. Listen to the tips and you'll be like Sarah. Talk to you guys soon. Hope you guys have an awesome day. I'm going inside to eat. I was gonna eat before I did this, but I didn't want to be like too full. So I'm gonna go eat now, and I will talk to you guys soon. Goodbye.